Hi, I'm Carol Tiener. I'm just pleased to be here. I'm sitting in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm the Director of Admissions at the University of Michigan Medical School. And we're pleased to be with you all and answer questions. But first, we're going to start off with getting a perspective from a couple of our physicians and then our students, and then some tips for applying to medical school. And then, yes, at any juncture, you can ask questions, but we will definitely leave time at the end for your questions, and we'll be as frank as possible and as transparent and as helpful as we possibly can about what it's like to apply to medical school. So right now I want to introduce Doctors Bettendorf and Berman, and they will go further with saying their roles at Michigan and why they're on the call for tonight. Dr. Berman?
Thanks, Carol. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Berman. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thanks for being here tonight. What I like to say is welcome to Ann Arbor, is where we are. Couple of things. I have the honor of serving as the Dean for Admissions for this medical school. Clinically, I have a really busy clinical practice as well. I'm a maternal fetal medicine specialist. So that means I'm a high-risk obstetrician. I focus on particularly in utero surgery, diagnosing fetal abnormality, and taking care of really complex pregnancies. Part of being the dean for admissions is obviously working through the entire admissions process and running the executive admissions committee. And we have a lot of really thoughtful, intentional members of this committee who make the decisions surrounding who we matriculate to the University of Michigan Med School. And we have one of our incredible members here. So I wanted to let Dr. Bettendorf introduce himself. Dr. Bettendorf?
Thank you, Dr. Berman. I'm Bob Bettendorf. I've been at the university as a faculty for about 15 years. Prior to that, I was in the Navy for about 24 years and did my training at San Diego at the Naval Hospital. I'm an anesthesiologist, and I work mostly outpatient surgery at this point. And so I am sort of familiar with, now granted it was a long time ago, but how the process works. I don't know if you guys have heard of the HPSP, the Health Professions Scholarship Program. That's what paid for medical school for me because I had prior active duty. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but happy to be here and answer your questions.
I want to ask Dr. Bettendorf a couple questions because full transparency, if I may, in 1995, I entered the University of Michigan Medical School as a bright-eyed, excited medical student. And I sat next to this incredible other first-year medical student whose name was Bob Bettendorf. So Dr. Bettendorf and I were medical school classmates. However, he and I had really different lived experiences coming into medical school. So you mentioned that you had been in the Navy. Will you expand on that a bit more and tell us a bit more about your career and how you then ended up sitting next to me in 1995 at this medical school?
Sure, happy to. I graduated from the University of Michigan undergrad in 1986. I went into the Navy. I went to Aviation Officer Candidate School in Pensacola and was a pilot. I flew F-14 Tomcats for 9 years until I decided that I wanted to go to medical school. That decision, and I'd been a microbiology major undergraduate, but I wasn't really convinced that I wanted to go to medical school. The thing, and they talk about, divine intervention. I thought if I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to have to get out of the Navy to do it, and then I'm going to have to, just go through it as a civilian. And I was flying at the time, and I was at the Officers Club at Naval Air Station Miramar, which is where I was stationed for years. And I saw a flight surgeon who was in a flight suit, and the flight surgeon was wearing pilot wings and not flight surgeon wings. And I went up to him and I said, "Doc, you're wearing pilot wings. What's that all about?" And he had been an E-2 Hawkeye pilot. And I don't know if you know, E-2 is the thing that with the big dish that flies off the aircraft carrier, airborne early warning. He said, yeah, no, I was an E-2 pilot and I went to medical school. I stayed in the Navy. You know, they paid for it. This is blowing my mind. This is before the internet. So I didn't even know you could do this. It was just a chance meeting, a guy I had a beer with at the club. And he said, yeah, if you stay in, they have this thing called the Health Profession Scholarship Program. They'll pay for it. And all you really have to do is get into medical school and they will pay for you to stay in. And that's exactly what happened. And I mean, that was a chance meeting 33 years ago that led to where I am now. And so after I finished flying and my commitment was up, I took the scholarship, and then that's how I ended up in 1995 sitting next to Dr. Berman at the first day of school, sort of introducing ourselves and, you know, getting to know everyone.
Thank you for sharing that. So you blink, and now it's 2025, and we have the opportunity of a lifetime to work together. And again, as I said, you're on the admissions executive committee. So that means you see a lot of applications come through, in particular, people with military experience. What tips do you have, Dr. Bettendorf, to translate the military experience, the jobs you have all held, to this life in medicine and to an application to medical school?
If you've been in the military more than about 5 minutes, you know that acronyms rule the day. Okay, so everybody talks in acronyms. Medicine is the same way, by the way. The problem is most people in medicine have no idea what any military acronyms are. USA, is that US Army? Is that United States of America? Stuff like that. And so I'll see on applications every once in a while a little too much jargon, if you will. And that's just how you talk. I get that. But what I would suggest when you're filling out applications or writing essays or whatever, have somebody who's not in the military look at it and say, they're going to go, I don't know what that means. And that's a really good way to sort of, you know, put it in plain English so people understand what you do. And a lot of what the military applicants, they look incredibly impressive when you read the application because the stuff that they do, but a lot of it is stuff that anyone who goes through boot camp does. Anyone who goes through primary anything in the military has gone through a lot of that stuff. Service Academy graduates, I mean, if you've gone to the Service Academy, any of them, the curriculum is pretty fixed for 4 years, depending on your major. There's not a lot of free time to do other stuff. So getting the extra experience is difficult, especially because you're so prescribed for 4 years if you're at a Service Academy. Less so if you've gone to college. And we see, you know, we get people that did 4 years enlisted and then went to college for 4 years. Now they're applying to medical school. They were enlisted Marines, enlisted Navy, Army, etc. One guy, I remember particularly, had been a corpsman for 4 years and then went to went to undergrad. So that's the clinical experience you get doing something like that is far beyond what you would get. Even an intern graduated from medical school won't have that much experience. So it's difficult to translate that, but the more clear, plain English you use in the application, the better, because a lot of your applications can be read by people that were never in the military. They don't understand it. And I do get a couple of applications. What does this mean? What are they trying to say here? And so that is the most important thing. The second thing I will tell you is, and it seems obvious, know why you want to go to medical school. Why do you want to do this? It should be logical, clear, and able to be enunciated either in how you speak or your essays. That should be crystal clear. You'd be surprised the number of medical school applications that people don't answer that really well. And that's surprising because you're going to give up 4 years of your life to get this degree. Why do you want to do that? Be crystal clear about that. And I think that'll go a long way.
If I can build on that, I'd like to ask a question. So there are times that I have read applications from people who are in the military. And I'm going to be honest, I will do all the research that I can. I oftentimes will call some of these medical students who are on this Zoom, I'll call Dr. Bettendorf or some other faculty who have served, and I'll say, help me understand this. What is this? What was their lived experience? And what skills are they going to bring to medical school? And so I think I have two questions with that, Dr. Bettendorf. Number one, is there an element of humbleness and humility that is ingrained in the military that makes people not really share the skill sets that they have? And is there a way that you would advise students here to share their skill sets that they have? And is there a really particular way that you would advise them to express what they do and how that will apply to medicine?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't think people in the military tend to be very matter of fact. You're very direct because that's how you're trained. There's not a whole lot of flowery language because you're so mission oriented, and that's the essence of what you do in the military. So it's listing things that you've done, and people can gloss over. Somebody went through Ranger training, and it might be a sentence in their application that, oh, this guy did Ranger training. I mean, that's a big deal in the Army, or SEAL training, or something that really stands out. And they don't. I was the #1 SEAL that graduated. They don't do that. That's not what they do. They just talk about what they did, and here's how it applies to what I hope to do going forward. Sometimes you got to tease that out if you're looking at the application, because like I said, most civilians won't have any idea what that means. And so emphasizing it, having somebody else look at the application and say, this is important. Try to say this in a way, because it's not your nature to be bombastic and overinflate your accomplishments. The overwhelming majority of military applicants just don't do that. You got to tease it out of them in terms of what they've done and why it's important. And so that would be one thing that I would emphasize, especially if you've done something exceptional in the military. You don't have to be flowery and go crazy over it, but it's something that this was really important to me because it's talking in your voice still and emphasizing why it was important to you, or why it was important to the unit you were in, or the mission, or whatever the thing is that made it really important. Because when you go through things in the military, there's different layers. There's tier 1 operators all the way down to, ancillary folks and all that stuff. They're equally important in the mission to a degree, but you have to be able to explain why that was important to you using your voice. I don't know if I'm saying that clearly, but that's the thing. You're not trying to inflate you're just saying what you did. That's a fact. And you're not embellishing it. You're not embellishing your service. You're not doing anything like that, because you did this stuff. And it's putting it in a way that people can understand. That can be hard sometimes. And that's why it's really important to have somebody, maybe not in the military, look at it and say, okay, try to say it this way, because I understand it when you say it this way.
That's helpful. And then are there certain trends that you see in applications for those with military background, whether it's in the interview process, whether it's in the application itself?
I did see the ones I've seen since I've been on the committee there's a lot of folks, not a lot, but going back to being very direct with the way you talk. And so some people don't interpret that well. It's not, some people want you to be really reflective and why are we doing this? And that's just not sometimes in your nature to talk like that. And so directness, I think it's an asset, but not everyone does. And so practicing interviewing with someone who's not in the military would be a wonderful thing to do. So they go, I don't even know what do you really want to go? I'm not getting it from that. And so, like, again, not talking about embellishing anything. I'm just talking about the way you talk, and especially in a mission-oriented culture, it tends to be very direct, non-flowery, and there's no extra words. It's just, this is why I want to do this. And that doesn't always resonate with everybody. So again, practicing interviewing is something that I can tell you would be a fantastic help, especially someone, not your buddy or just somebody out of the military, somebody you know from school or whatever. Try it out and see if they can understand what you're saying, for one, and two, the way you're saying it, does it sound like, okay, I get what they're saying and I know why they want to do this?
I think that's so helpful. I appreciate your insight. Um, having worked with you clinically, having worked with you in these leadership roles, I so appreciate your directness, Dr. Bettendorf. And I think it is an asset in medicine. And I also think we all communicate in different ways. And I think that's a really thoughtful point of accessing mentorship, not only from people in your immediate circle, but also people outside of your immediate circle. We recommend that for everyone so that you can get different feedback. Have people look at your applications. Does it describe who I am? Does it describe what I've done? Does it describe my greatest strengths and attributes? That's what you're looking for in application prep and then interview prep. I want to hand the mic back to Carol because we have some unbelievable University of Michigan medical students here. And I think that's really, they're our greatest ambassadors and can talk about so much and want to help support you. So Dr. Bettendorf, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks, Dr. Bettendorf. Thanks, Dr. Dean Berman, too. I want to appreciate you and the committee that you've led, because I find that some applicants don't really understand that there are humans behind this process, and that people like yourself and Dr. Bettendorf are very thoughtfully reading these applications and trying to understand the applicants and their journey and where they want to go in this field of medicine. So I appreciate your leadership in that space too. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
See y'all later.
All right, James, you are the eldest, right? And the number of years you've been in medical school
That's
here at
true.
Michigan.
I'm also blurred out, and I need to figure out how to fix that without embarrassing myself with my background. I don't think there's anything too
There
scary.
you go.
Um,
You want to introduce
so-
yourself?
Sure. As you guys have already heard, I'm James. I'm a third-year medical student. I was a Marine officer for about 10 years before I decided to make the change to medicine. At this point, looking at some generalist specialties like emergency medicine and internal medicine as I'm kind of approaching my application for residency. I've been with Service to School since my last year of active duty, as someone getting mentored, and then I've been trying to also help folks interested in post-baccalaureate pre-med programs and medical school more generally. That's what I've got. I don't have any fun facts other than my arms are a little longer than they should be. But I'll hand it off to Scott to introduce himself as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys first off for coming out. When we kind of talked about setting this meeting up, our goal is in the name trying to demystify this process. And, I ran into a lot of issues of trying to be fit into a pre-med box that I felt like I didn't fit in. And I had a lot of trouble finding representation or advice. And so, our goal and something I'm really passionate about is trying to help veterans kind of bridge that gap to medical school. But I went to college for 2 years, got my associate's degree, and then ended up enlisting in the Marine Corps. I did 5 years as a reconnaissance Marine, and kind of found out about service to schools in 2019. I got pulled for a deployment when I didn't think I had enough time to do that. And I was going to use that year to prep to go to college. And, I had a week to figure everything out. And it was service to schools that, from SHIP, I was able to send emails back, and my ambassador did a lot of legwork to help me so I didn't miss an entire year because I wasn't able to apply. So since then, I've been working as an ambassador as well. and got out in 2020, followed my now wife out to Phoenix, where I finished my undergrad at ASU, worked a year in clinical research, and applied for medical school, and now an M1 here in lovely Ann Arbor, Michigan.
And John.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm John. I was in the Army for 4.5 years as an infantry officer. I did ROTC out of the University of Cincinnati. I kind of, towards the end of my time, after I came back from deployment, I decided I wanted to do something else with my life. And I thought medicine would be a great transition. I think there's a lot of similarities between what we do in the military as a whole and what we do in medicine. And I never used services schools, actually. I didn't know anything about it. I did use Hire Our Heroes, and like what Dr. Bettendorf was talking about, they helped me craft a resume together where they took everything that I did. I basically told this one gentleman everything, my roles in the Army, just in straight Army speak, and he translated it all so it could be easily discernible by people who had no military experience whatsoever. And I worked as an EMT for about a year, and then I moved to Chicago, worked in the emergency room there, and kind of similar to what Dr. Bendorf was talking about is interviewing people who have no experience in the military so you can practice sort of explaining things in a clear lens. I found a resident there who actually attended the University of Michigan, and he was in the Navy. And being able to meet a doctor who had already experienced that life in the military, he really helped like hold my hand and walk me through the process and translating a lot of this stuff, because he can see it through both lenses now. He can see it as a resident, as a doctor, and as somebody who was in the military, and really marry that together, which was incredibly helpful for me, and motivates me to want to do the same thing for other veterans too.
It's great. I think you all can help me with, I'm going to tell you some tips, and I'd love the med students to interject with their lived experience with applying. And we are happy to have questions put in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask even as I'm talking. I like interactive discussions so that we're hitting the points that are most meaningful for you. One tip is might seem obvious, but it is to use sources that are reliable. And there's a lot of things out there that you're not quite sure, like Student Doctor Net is something, Reddit, Threads. Sometimes you're not sure who those people are who are posting. So it's best to go to the AMCAS sites, and I can post some in the chat, some websites for you to go to. Chats like this one, where we're reputable admissions people. We will tell you, I will be frank about how Michigan does things, and try to point out when it's not perhaps a consistent thing. So med schools will, in general, they will follow the same admissions process, and we have a main application, which is called AMCAS. And I will post there's an applicant guide that I can put in the chat so that you can see that. There's also sources through AMCAS and through the AAMC where you are seeing these stories and threads and experts who will, it's like create a winning application, or understanding the process. Things like this where I think they're very helpful. There's a lot to dig into, even on our websites, but that might sound pretty basic, but it's, I think, very important for you to hit the sources where, that are reliable. Okay. When you're setting up your application, you have these essays to write, you have these experiences that you have 15 slots where you can interject your experiences that you've had that Dr. Bettendorf was referring to, and to how are you going to convey those experiences, and how do those the aspects that you honed in your leadership, in your personality, in your growth, and your exposure to those who aren't like you. How do you convey all that to on your application, and experience that might be just a few character length, or maybe just a bit more? Or I'm curious, with any of our med students, how did you, maybe one of you can talk to that, like how to wrestle with which ones to choose.
Yeah,
of your
I'd love to
students.
hop in on that because that's something
Yeah.
that I struggled with because I tended to think of my time in service as like assignments, billets, or duty stations, which is not necessarily like experiences. You could have a ton of experiences over a 2-year period or a 4-year period. And the advice I got that I think was really useful was like, what were the actual like events that you found impactful, not only as a way to demonstrate your contribution to the unit or the mission, which is what that's where my mindset was, but it was reframed to me as like, what were the experiences that made you different? You know, what made me different? What changed me? What changed my mindset? What gave me a new personal policy that I'm now carrying forward that I could use to kind of show what I hope to bring forward into medicine? So, you know, using my background in the infantry, right? Like that could be a single field op where like I made a big mistake, but I learned how to like take those failures and turn them into either like things to improve or successes, right? It could be, you know, passing or preparing for an inspection of whatever type, depending on your background. And that can make it so much more personal because you're able to speak to something specific as opposed to I spent 4 years as a, or I spent 3 years as a squad leader and I went on one deployment and we trained for a year and a half, you know, and I exhibited leadership. And like those are all great, but that's not, you know, I'm sort of exaggerating the lack of detail, but hopefully to illustrate that you can, if you're just taking the wave tops, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're sort of sacrificing potential word count to really show who you are. So think about that and see if you want to, you know, dig a little bit at a lower or at a greater level of resolution to find your experiences.
And just my one quick thing on that too is, you know, this was, I think, a very, again, I think an obviously very difficult part of the application. And so for me, my approach is I picked one, you know, I wanted to present myself as an applicant, as a veteran, but also kind of holistically as a human. I took one very impactful moment and in my time that I felt like represented and embodied a lot of the things that I had um, accomplished and grown in, but not explicitly talked about all of the things. I picked that one moment as kind of the crux of my essay, dove into that, but then also kind of talked about myself as, you know, the human side of it, and kind of the civilian side as well. And you know, I understood that I wouldn't be able to translate all my experiences as deeply as I wanted to.
Mhm. You know, I'm glad you mentioned the essays. I want to mention that you will be writing essays, and there's a main essay on the primary application, which is essentially why medicine, what motivates you to learn more about medicine? Why are you on this journey? How can you tell us admissions officers how a bit more about your story that you weren't able to fit into those 15 experiences that I mentioned. It's a great opportunity for you to give us an even more complete picture of you and this trajectory towards medicine. You will also write some secondary essays. So those are unique to the medical schools to which you apply. So dovetailing with my request that you do some good research into verifiable sources. When you're doing your research on the schools that your curious about applying, they should be very evident on their websites about what their mission is at that school, so that you can get an idea of as to whether that school might be a school where you would thrive. Those essays, the secondary essays, will marry that mission. So you will be doing your investigative work about the school, and then you'll be writing those secondary essays about how you might envision yourself at these schools. It is another window in for admissions people to say, okay, this person has done some research into my school, and I can picture them here. They've shown me these skills. They've shown me, like for Michigan, we're curious about the impact that you want to have on patient care and in the field of medicine. And we're looking for those leadership opportunities that you've had. We're looking for your strong academic work. We're looking for the way that you have worked on teams, and medicine is such a team-oriented profession that we're looking for all of those, and those essays kind of tie it all together for us. So I want you to just be thinking of that as you do your research on schools. Also know that we will be waiving our secondary fee for you all, and know that some schools will do that. You can always reach out in case if they might waive their secondary fees for you. You can always ask in a very professional way if finances are a concern. You want to look into the fee assistance program that AMCAS has for people to. You have to turn in paperwork, turn in documents for to show if you have financial need, and they determine whether you can have fee waivers and MCAT materials and such like that. So again, just be doing your due diligence about schools, about fee assistance, and about those essays. I don't know if our med students have any comments about those areas.
I just wanted to comment that that new development with the Michigan specific waiver of the fees, I think just goes to show that, what I really feel is that Michigan is a university that takes the veteran and military experience really seriously, and is putting their money right where their mouth is in terms of trying to reduce barriers for veterans that are trying to pursue careers in medicine. So I just wanted to give that plug for the university and thank Carol for the work she's done to make that happen. There was one question from the chat, Carol, that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, go for it.
Is there a minimum number of hours or time that can count as an experience, or do you have a best practice guideline for how to sift through that?
So that is an excellent question, because schools will handle this in different ways. And at Michigan, we do not have a specific number of hours of, say, working with patients. So you need to have a lot of clinical work and patient-facing care of some sort. Shadowing is great at the beginning of your journey to figure out, maybe is this the road for me? What other meaningful work might you have had with patients? We don't have a specific number of hours. And the reason we don't do that is because people have different journeys to this road of applying. And some people are in your circumstances and working full time, or have a lot of constraints, working, helping their families, or all kinds of things. So we want to get a complete picture as possible of how you spent your time, and try not to put too many barriers on saying you can't apply if you don't have X number of hours. That being said, there are some schools that have thresholds of number of hours, and it should be evident on their websites, I would hope, if they do have those. Some will have number of hours of like volunteer work, for example. Some might have a threshold of a GPA for your undergraduate work, for example. Some might have a threshold of what you need to get on your MCAT, which is the entrance exam for admissions. And those things might be evident on their website, might not. There's something called the Medical School Admissions Requirements website. And that, I believe you have to pay $35 per year to get that information. Although the information is on schools' websites, this site is an official site that pulls it all together for all the medical schools in the United States and Canada. And you can see the mission of the school, the type of community, the range of scores where they've taken, say, applications from, and then interviewees from, and then ultimately matriculated students into their class that have their range of GPA and MCAT that can be helpful for people. There's a lot of statistics on there that's verified statistics, and then there's a lot of information put in by the schools. You can tell what's the official and what's the like text part that's put in by the school. I think that, thanks for putting that site in there about the MSAR, because I think it is really helpful. It's too bad you have to pay for it. I think everybody has to pay for that one. I'm not sure. Maybe if you get the fee assistance, you might get that free if you get the fee assistance program. So thank you, Brendan. That's great. So glad to hear that. So I don't know, did I hit the answer to that a bit? Michigan's quite different than other schools, so yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Sure. And
yeah.
did someone raise their hand to chat to ask a question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask how holistic the admissions process was, but from the sound of like how you talked about it, it kind of seemed dependent on the school in which we apply to, if that's correct.
It does. I think for the general rule of my colleagues at other schools and across the United States is that we all do holistic review. The issue is whether, at what point, how are schools screening for applications? So for example, we don't say you have to have like a 3.0 GPA to apply to Michigan. But if you look at our range of scores for grades, and then for MCAT, you'll see a range. And so you'll know like, oh, well, this range of people, if this school interviewed in this range, then I'm in that range. So that gives me a bit of a gauge. That being said, the GPA statistics are for your undergrad GPA. So many times people have gone on this journey of maybe they went through college and they weren't ready for college. It was rough. It was not going great. And they're a different person now. It's years later. They're more mature. They have a better focus on their education. And they have greatly improved their GPA, either through doing a post-bac or just repeating courses, doing the same, generally speaking, med schools don't want to see a grade below C. Okay, that's just a general idea for you. And so you have done the hard work. Now, technically, your GPA might not be that much higher, but because medical schools do holistic review, we can see the semesters of coursework you've done and in what years. And so you can go back and you can show this growth, okay? What will be key for you is to also show that you can take standardized tests like an MCAT, which will really help medical schools know that you'll be able to do the boards, which are these exams you need to take really throughout your career as a medical professional to keep your licensure. So you are entering this world of standardized tests. It's just, that's the way it is. So you'll want to take the MCAT when you're really ready to take it. So have that science coursework done, and don't do the MCAT when some relative is telling you to take it, or some, I don't know, some friend. Do it when you are really ready and you have that score. One of my main tips for you is to not apply until you're really ready and you have kind of your letters of recommendation. We can talk about those if you like. You've got these experiences, you've got your grades, your coursework done, you've got your MCAT, and you're satisfied with that score. It's reflective of all the work you put into that exam, and then you're ready to apply. I'll let the med students talk about the process. I know from hearing about it that there's a lot of angst, and it goes on a very long time, many months. And so you don't want to apply until you're really ready to, like, I've got great experience. I know as best I can, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to apply. So you can't do you can choose that time. You can choose how hard you study. You can choose when you take your exam. You can choose when you if you can control many things. And then when you apply, and you can control where you apply, and you can, but you can't control things once that's submitted. You have to, it's kind of out of your hands, and you've done your good work. And I don't know if one of y'all want to talk about that whole experience of applying and how to get yourself, John or Scott, like, how did you get yourself geared up for, like, okay, I'm doing this?
Yeah, no, you actually, what you just talked about was, it felt like you were talking directly at me. I before I enlisted in the Marine Corps, like I said, I did 2 years of college, and I got my associate's degree. And I had a 2.7 GPA, and I think the only STEM class I had got a D in. Enlisted in the Marine Corps, got out, and went back to school at ASU, and I put my head down and worked really hard, and did really, really well. And so, I kind of, along what we were just talking about, where I felt like I had grown as a student, and this was a concern that I had when I was going in as an applicant, is this going to translate enough to where medical schools will see that there was this massive shift, and the grades are polar opposite with a 5-year break in between. I knew, for me, the MCAT was going to be a very important aspect. It's going to, for me, was going to show that the grades that I had recently got weren't a fluke, and that I had the capacity to do well in medical school. And once I took the MCAT, I had the opportunity to apply to medical school right then, because I'd done well enough, and I think I could have gotten into medical school. And me and my wife sat down and talked about it, and decided to wait a year. And that was, like Carol was saying, was I wanted to put the best product forward, and I wanted to dedicate the time. And what I didn't realize at the time, and in hindsight I do realize, is the year that you spend applying to medical school is so much work. It's crazy. It is so much more work than I had ever thought it was going to be. And the amount of time you want to dedicate to writing these essays, and creating this product of who you are at such a refined quality, so all that can come through to the admissions department. I made the choice to wait a year and then do it right, instead of trying to half-pass it and just put an application in. And I think that paid dividends. I don't think I'd be sitting here as a Michigan, medical student had I tried to rush it. I think, taking that year to really dedicate myself to creating this product that I was proud of and that represented me, I needed that entire year to do so.
I'll say for me, because, and I'm sure for most of us, because most people, if you're in the military, you're at least doing like 4 years, so you're already going to be older. I was kind of in between, picking between waiting another year and then applying, and I just decided to send it, and it ended up working out. But I did have to commit so much of my time towards that MCAT because, much like Scott's story, I was a horrible student in my undergrad days, and even the classes I took after I got out of the military were barely enough to get my science GPA, I think, just below a 3.2. So I knew that MCAT was really all I had left for me in order to really shine, academically at least. So I did commit, all the time I had. I didn't see friends for, more than, I think it was around 2 months. I was basically studying and working, and that's it. I wasn't doing anything else. And if I could do it again, I would do the same thing because it paid off in the end. And I think that's something everybody needs to consider, no matter how holistic schools might say they are. You just have to control as much as you can. And the MCAT is one of those things, regardless of how you did in your undergrad years, you have a chance to take this test and really show that you have what it takes academically. And you've already proven that X factor by being in the military and being able to talk about all your stories. So just do everything you can in order to be the best applicant possible.
I love that you mentioned that, John, because when anyone would see the statistics or the range, I do like to point out that if someone is lower, like our range is a 3.0 to a 4.0 GPA, and then the MCAT's 50th percentile and up, someone who has a 3.0 would have a high MCAT because they do need to show that they can demonstrate the knowledge that maybe the coursework just wasn't their vibe, but they did show that they had the knowledge on the MCAT. So vice versa, if someone's lower on the MCAT, perhaps it's lower on the clinical reasoning subsection, the science subsection scores are quite strong, for example. So you don't really see the whole picture behind statistics. And you all know that anyway from your own selves. Like, I'm not just my statistics either. So also, when you think about the timing to apply, I like to make this analogy of you're putting together all of these experiences and the MCAT and the GPA and your good hard work and your volunteering and your leadership and all of these wonderful, patient encounters. And you have put these all together and you're presenting them in an application to us. And I think of that as you've baked this cake and it's a wonderful cake. To me, it's like a flourless chocolate cake because that's what I like. But I can eat that, I can have that, and it's beautiful and wonderful. During your application year, you need to keep on like making the frosting for that cake. You're still working in these areas, okay? So when you have interviews, you can speak about what you've been doing like last week, last month, so you can do it like with a cake, and then if you can have it with the frosting and do it during your application, you're okay, but you do need to have the cake baked. I wouldn't want you to apply with no chocolate in your cake or like no eggs or something, okay? So, yeah, I think also I just wanted to put in a site about guidelines for writing a letter of recommendation. So if you you could give this to the people who are writing your letters, because many times letter writers have never written a letter for a medical school application. And we're looking for those letters to speak to your attributes. We're not as interested in a letter about your grades and scores and things. We want to know what you are like as a person. Are you dependable? Are you resilient? Are you a team player? Are you, do you stay after, when something's done and you're, going the extra mile? So that resource might help you if you give your letter writers those, and hopefully you pick people who know you well. That's always really helpful. Okay. We have a few more minutes if you have questions. Anybody else?
First
Or
off,
the
want to say
Yeah.
thank you for putting this on.
You're welcome.
It looks like a lot of you all did your prereqs in various ways. Some, formal post back, some more DIY. Are there any just general tips on maybe going back to school after having been out for a while? James has been super helpful. He gave me a book rack, but I'm sure there are other advice here that would be very helpful.
Yeah,
would
I
say-
can. Oh,
Go ahead, Scott. No, you.
Yeah, so I did. Like I said, I when I got out of the Marine Corps, the 2.5 years it took me to finish my undergrad was it was all STEM classes. So it's all my what I would consider my harder classes of microbiology degree, and I don't know that there was anything that I did that that prepared me for it. Weirdly enough, I feel like coming off a deployment where I was working all the time and then going into school, I was just in that mindset of putting my head down and going. I think helped a lot. But if you had the opportunity to dip your toe in the water with a work, like a couple classes that are independent before going on a full workload, because the grades that you're going to be getting, the most recent grades, you want them to be the best they can be. So you don't want to take a full, 17, 18 credit workload that right off the bat where you were like overwhelmed and your grades suffer, and now you're trying to recover from a more recent dip. So starting at what I think the full-time minimum is like 12 credits. So if you have to be a full-time student, do the minimum credits at first so you can start to work yourself into it.
Some tips that I would give is try to make sure that your classes are in person if you can, because I think that matters to some schools, if not most of them. Another thing is I did take a mix between community college and four-year institutions, but because I went from Tennessee when I got out to New York City and then to Chicago. So it was really hard to establish connections with faculty there. And if I could go back, because I was taking STEM classes again, because I did so terribly my freshman and sophomore year in my undergrad days, I would have tried to get some more research experience because I had none. And I think that was the biggest error outside of my GPA for my application and could have been a big bonus. So I would have tried to work on that, but I wouldn't worry too much about community college because the classes I did take, they're ones that I'd already taken as an undergrad and did poorly in. So it was like general chemistry and then physics, just the basic ones. But I took biochemistry and anatomy and I think another higher level science class at a four-year institution, and that can maybe matter to some schools. But that's about it. I think as far as going back to school, I wouldn't be afraid of doing a DIY post back. I know some people do the sort of tailored ones, and those are great too because you do get to meet a lot of faculty and they can help you get into the school. But I don't know I don't have any personal experience with that.
Can I ask a question to follow? Oh, unless you had one.
Oh, no, great. Yeah, thank you all.
Okay. So going off of that, because I got out like 3 years ago, and now I'm just like, I had to figure out how to study again. And so I'm not gonna lie, I don't have the best grades out there. My GPA is like pretty mid and I'm a pretty mid student. But I'm like it took this like the time I've been here to figure all of that out. What do you kind of suggest as far as like what to do, I guess, with GPA and MCAT, or like what I should be focusing on? Because I think my grades are pretty mid. So does that mean I should do a post back and I should, like, you know what I'm saying? Or should I just go straight into the MCAT and be like, all right, let me just get the best score I can?
No, if you're not doing well in your classes now, especially if they're classes that are directly related to the MCAT, I wouldn't just try to push yourself to do that until you figure out how to like properly study and, invest your time to do well. Because you don't want to take the MCAT more than once. It's horrible. So I would try to put all your eggs in one basket when you do feel that you're ready. And then maybe talk to your professors about ways that you can, better learn the material, or if there's any mentorship or student peer tutors available. Definitely look into that, because it's not just a matter of putting in the time, but there is an efficient way to study too. And, you'll learn this, when you do get into med school, you'll figure out how to properly invest your time and how best you learn. But it's something to definitely consider and figure out now too, because you do want to do well in these classes, because this is a very, difficult process to get in.
They're great tips also about trying to take the MCAT just once. Yeah, you don't want to take that for practice or something. Caroline?
Hi, thank you guys for coming tonight. I had a question about letters of recommendation. For a little background, I did ROTC, recently commissioned from USC, and now am fulfilling my service commitment in the Air Force in the Medical Service Corps. And so I'm a bit ways out from going to the medical school through the whole application process in terms of clicking that submit button, given I have my service commitment in front of me. But I do know that medical school is my end goal. So my first question is for the letters of recommendation. I will, by the time I click the submit button, it will have been some time since I was in OChem 2. And so, do I need letters of recommendations from my professors back in college, given that I'll be a little bit out of touch with them? Um, and then, my current faculty, supervisors, peers, they're all military members, right? I have a medical group commander, and while they do have medical backgrounds, they have been in the military for quite some time. So just some advice with getting letters of recommendation from military members, and whether or not we need the recommendations from our professors from school.
It's interesting, Caroline, because we don't require that you have professor letters here at Michigan. We don't have very, specifications like that, but other schools do. So I don't know if our med students have any advice for that or not, if you've been far removed from class.
I'll hop in there because I had about a 12-year gap between speaking to one of my professors and him writing me a letter of recommendation, and I actually used two of them. And you'd be surprised at how enthusiastic they are to like reconnect. At least those two were. Like they wanted to hear how I was doing, where I'd been living. Send me your CV. Let's do a phone call, and I didn't really think of them as people who remembered me, and they may not have. But I think the story that you're presenting, right, is like, hey, it's been a while. I've been out on this adventure. I'm coming back and I have this like pretty ambitious goal. It's a great goal, right? I think they'll be excited to reconnect. And now that you're still close in time to them, find some time to reach out to them and say, hey, I don't think we're going to do a letter of recommendation anytime soon, but can I keep your information for 4 years from now or beyond? So that'll definitely help. And then one thing I wanted to mention about military recommendations from military folks, I don't know how many of those Carol has seen, But as someone who has written letters of recommendation for folks while I was in the military, not for med school, but like I had no idea what I was doing. I was the guy that they asked to write a letter. I did it. I was using, language that was similar to what I had done for like fitness reports or performance evaluations. And so it's definitely sent them the link on how to write a letter of recommendation, because they're also not probably not going to sing your praises in the same way that a college professor is. It's probably going to be significantly more subdued. James was an excellent contributor to the mission, which included, and then like a dollar number or like hours spent on watch or something like that. So funneling them that resource is going to really help them take care of you, because that's what they want to do. They just don't know how to do it.
And just to amplify one point that James made, for me, there was one person specifically who I knew I wanted to write a letter of recommendation that was going to be far separated from when I was going to be applying to medical school. And I made a priority to stay in touch with them. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but I would make sure to send them an email or set up a phone call or something like once a year, and just spend the time to keep continuity of that relationship going, so that when time came, there was the feeling that there was no separation in that relationship. And I know that's a little bit different for an OChem teacher, but in kind of, I don't know, that's kind of, I think, still relevant.
No, that's great advice. And I'm really lucky I had some great professors, so I'll add that to kind of the list of things to prepare for my application process in terms of connecting and maintaining those relationships. Thanks, guys.
Welcome, Caroline. How about you, John? What's your question?
Hey, good evening, everybody, and thanks for the invite, James. I'll try to keep it brief. I know we're out of time. Doing the DIY piecemeal, trying to figure out the courses. Currently, active duty Marine officer. For research, I know John mentioned, a good way to kind of bolster your application is to try some research opportunities. And this might be a silly question, but who are the best people to reach out to say, hey, I'm interested in assisting you with your research, whatever it may be, because I need some for my application and I'm interested in learning more about what you're doing.
I can field this one, at least for a starting point. It's a hidden secret, I feel like, that I stumbled upon. Clinical research coordinator. It's a job title. It's paid. And when I was looking for a job after graduating college and before applying, I just needed to work something in the medical field. But what you do is you work on clinical research under physician. And so you get to interact with patients. You work with physicians. For me, I worked very closely with a physician in his practice, and was like a very, what felt like an important cog in this process of research. So really enjoyable work where you get to interact with patients. So, and I got really relevant research experience and clinical experience doing that job. I cannot recommend it enough.
Awesome. Thanks,
John,
John.
are you active right now?
Yeah, I'm currently active, looking to EAS in 27. So I'm
Okay.
kind of MCAT.
I ask
bringing.
Yeah, I ask only because I know it can be really hard to find things to do while active, right? Because your time is really monopolized by the service commitment. But one thing that I found that I was able to fit in, and I think this can work for anyone, I just walked into the base emergency department and I said, in uniform, and I just like, hey, this is weird, but I would like to shadow here. Who do I talk to? And I know that will go differently for different ranks, more likely than not. So I do know I have some privilege walking in with, silver bars on my collar. But I think, again, you'd be surprised at how interested some folks will be to see someone with that type of initiative. So I ended up going either after hours, because the emergency department's always open, to shadow the docs that were on shift, or on the weekend. So it's just something to consider for those of you who are still active. There are some hoops to jump through, but it might be the only thing you can find in that circumstance.
Awesome. Thank you.
How about you, Brandon?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. So my question is, as somebody who's nearing the finish line in terms of getting my application together, one thing that I might be a little weak on is non-clinical volunteer hours. And I was wondering if anybody else was in a similar situation when they were getting their application together, and if they were able to use their military service as kind of a bridge to cover that.
I didn't have too many of those, at least nothing that was recent. I had some, hours from my undergrad time, which at that point was about 10 years in the past. I expect that my time in service sort of helped, fill that gap. I'd kind of defer to Carol to see if agrees with me, but I think, uh, military service is not the same as working in a soup kitchen, in a lot of ways, but it's still, it's service, it's not just a job. So, um, that's at least how I was going into it. I didn't commit a whole lot of effort to try and fill that gap personally.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think sometimes people will give some instances of how they might have helped um lead a class or help in a community project that's not long term. It's just it's a shorter thing. But I have seen that on applications. But yeah, I think you all are doing a service that is commendable, admired, and important. And I think if you draw out when you're explaining some of your experiences and these things, that helps, again, back to the point that Dr. Bettendorf was making, that can help the reader understand from what mindset you're coming from. So I wouldn't just assume things. I really think it's important for you to bring across yourself in this application. I think people I find it very interesting I get the sense in applications when someone is genuine, when they're authentic, when they are really resonating with this journey to medicine and it's important to them, and you can show your passion for this. We are not as into like box checking, like you actually don't have to have research to apply to medical school. Even Michigan, we have very strong research here, but we want to see how you're curious about the world. So is that through research? Are you posing questions and in that realm, or are you doing it through community service or learning about others who aren't like you and having that exposure? And see where I'm coming from? It's really truly you want to that's my final piece of advice from me tonight, is that the more genuine you are on the application, the more it will resonate and the more you will find a fit of a medical school for you. Because you're putting yourself out there and you're trying, yes, you need to understand what we need. And we've tried to cover some of these things, with your academic work, your academic competency, and your service and your clinical exposure and leadership, teamwork. So these things, yes, you need to have them in your background, but you want to answer the essays authentically you. And don't think, and again, for interviews, we didn't get into that, but these wonderful med students can answer those questions for you after I leave if you want to hear about interviewing. But I think again, if you're answering from your heart, your authentic self, and truly what you know, where you're coming from, you're gonna find a fit for you better than if you're trying to second guess, like, well, what do they want me to say? You know, like, what should I be saying? Oh no, did I say the wrong word? You know, we just, you know, so I'm big into that where I think you'll have much better outcomes if you're thinking about it that way. Fully understanding you need to have all this body of work. So
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was really helpful.
you're welcome. Thanks, Scott and James and John, for helping tonight. And it was
Thanks,
a pleasure
Carol.
to be. Thank you for your service, you all.
Yeah.